The emergency klaxon tore through the night like a wounded animal. Victoria Kane sprinted across the compound, rain lashing her face as purple lightning split the sky. The ion storm had arrived 6 hours early, and something was falling from the clouds. Not debris, a ship. She watched it spiral downward, trailing fire and sparks, engines screaming as they fought against gravity and failed. The impact shook the ground 300 yards beyond the outer wall. Victoria's hand went to the pistol at her hip. Nothing good ever fell from the sky on Refuge Station. She reached the command center breathless, her second-in-command already pulling up thermal scans. "It's still hot," Garrett said, his weathered face grim in the monitor's glow. "Single life sign. Moving." "Defenses?" Victoria asked. "Storm's already frying half our systems. We've got maybe 40% operational." The life sign on the screen moved with purpose, stumbling toward their walls. Victoria zoomed in on the visual feed and her blood went cold. The figure was humanoid but wrong. Too tall? Limbs too long. Even through the distortion and rain, she could see the telltale ridge along the spine, the distinctive gait. Kethryn. Alien. The same species that had burned her homeworld 7 years ago. "Seal the gates," she ordered. "Victoria! The storm!" I said, "seal them." The figure collapsed against the outer wall, one arm raised, pounding weakly against the reinforced steel. The cameras caught its face for just a moment. Female features aristocratic even through the pain. And something else. Crown marks along the temples, royal markings. Victoria's jaw tightened. A Kethryn royal, here, now. Every instinct screamed at her to leave it outside to die, the same way the Kethryn had left her daughter outside their shelter during the raids. The same way they'd left Marcus, her husband, bleeding in the street while their ships burned the sky. The pounding continued, weaker now. Garrett stepped beside her. "Boss, she's dying." "Good." But even as she said it, Victoria's hand moved to the gate controls. She thought of Sarah, 8 years old, begging for the door to open. She thought of the faces that had ignored those pleas. Human faces. Kethran faces. It hadn't mattered. Cruelty was the same in every language. Pfft! Her finger hovered over the button. "Damn it," she whispered, and opened the gate. The Kethryn Queen stumbled through the moment the gap was wide enough, collapsing onto the concrete floor of the airlock. Green blood pooled beneath her, mixing with rainwater. She looked up at Victoria with eyes that burned gold in the emergency lighting, and despite the pain etched across her face, she maintained a rigid dignity. "Sanctuary," the alien said in perfect English, her voice like wind through crystals. "I claim sanctuary under the Accord of Broken Stars." Victoria almost laughed. "That accord died with the peace. Your people made sure of that. I did not." The Queen's hand pressed against a wound in her side, green blood seeping through her fingers. "I am Zira, 7th of the crowned line, and I am not your enemy. You're Kethryn. That makes you my enemy. Then kill me now and be done with it." Zira's eyes never left Victoria's face. "But know that if I die here, the war you think has ended will consume everything. My death is the spark they need." Victoria raised her pistol, but something in those golden eyes gave her pause. Not fear, resignation, acceptance. The same look she'd seen in her own mirror every morning for 7 years. "Who's hunting you?" "My brother, my counsel. Everyone who believed peace made us weak." Zira coughed, more green blood speckling her lips. "They staged a coup during the summit. I barely escaped. And you came here? To a human colony?" "I had nowhere else to go. The storm disabled my navigation. Your shelter was the only structure for 100 miles. Zira's strength was fading. Please. I know what your people suffered. I know what mine did. But I swear on my crown, I tried to stop it." Victoria stared at this broken queen bleeding on her floor and saw something she hadn't expected. Truth, and more than that, desperation that matched her own on the day the raids came. She lowered the pistol and keyed her comm. "Medical team to the north airlock. We have a visitor." Garrett's voice crackled through. "Boss, are you sure about this?" Victoria looked at Zira, at the way the alien queen held herself even while dying, pride and pain warring in every line of her too long frame. No, Victoria said, but do it anyway. The medical team arrived within minutes, their faces shocked when they saw what Victoria had brought inside. Dr. Hayes, a stout woman with silver hair, knelt beside Zira without hesitation. We'll need to move her to the infirmary. I don't know Catherine physiology, but I can try. I can guide you, Zira said weakly. The wound is deep, but not fatal if treated properly. They carried her through corridors that suddenly felt too narrow, too exposed. Colonists emerged from their quarters, drawn by the commotion. Their faces ranged from shock to outrage. Victoria met every gaze with steel in her own, daring them to challenge her decision. No one did, not yet. In the infirmary, Zira directed Hayes through the procedure with remarkable clarity despite her injuries. Her anatomy was different enough to be fascinating, similar enough to be disturbing. Hayes worked quickly, her hands steady even as the building shook from thunder that sounded like artillery fire. "The storm's getting worse," Garrett reported from the doorway. "We're losing power in sectors 3 and 7. Climate control is fluctuating." Victoria watched Zira's face as Hayes sealed the wound with a combination of human medical gel and instructions whispered in that crystal voice. The alien queen never flinched, never cried out, just gripped the edge of a medical table hard enough to leave dents in the metal. When Hayes finally stepped back, Zira sat up slowly, one hand pressed to her bandaged side. "Thank you, Doctor. You have considerable skill." Hayes nodded curtly and left, clearly uncomfortable. Zira turned those golden eyes to Victoria. "Why did you save me? I'm still asking myself that question. Your hatred is justified. I felt it the moment you looked at me." Zira's voice was soft but steady. "What did my people take from you?" Victoria's hand tightened on her pistol grip. "Everything." For a long moment neither spoke. The storm howled outside, shaking the walls. Finally, Zira nodded slowly. "Then we have something in common. My brother took everything from me as well. My throne, my family, my honor. I don't care about your honor." "No, but you care about your people." Zira gestured to the walls around them. "This shelter, this colony. You built it from nothing, didn't you? After the raids." Victoria's jaw clenched. "How do you know about the raids?" "'Cause I tried to stop them. I argued in the High Council for 3 months against the expansion into human territories. I was overruled, outvoted, declared a traitor to our manifest destiny." Zira's voice carried bitter weight. "When the fleet launched, I was locked in my chambers. They made me listen to the transmissions, made me hear what our soldiers did to your worlds, and I am supposed to believe you cared. Believe what you wish. I lost my mate because I opposed the war. She was executed as a sympathizer." Zira's voice cracked for the first time. "They made me watch." Victoria stared at this alien queen, this creature who should be her mortal enemy, and saw something reflected that she recognized. Grief, the kind that never heals, just scars over. "My daughter was 8, Victoria said quietly. "My husband tried to shield her when the bombs fell. They both died in my arms." Zira closed her eyes. "I am sorry. Those words mean nothing, but they are all I have." The building shuddered again, harder this time. Lights flickered. Somewhere in the distance, glass shattered. Garrett burst into the infirmary. "We've got a problem." The storm just tripled in intensity. We're reading massive energy fluctuations on all sensors. And there's something else. 3 ships just entered orbit. They're holding position above the storm. Zira's face went pale, her skin taking on a sickly gray-green hue. "They found me. My brother's hunters. Can they get through the storm? Not yet. But the moment it weakens, they will descend." Zira stood unsteadily, one hand still pressed to her side. "You need to surrender me. If you give me to them, they might spare your colony." "Might. My brother does not value human life. But there is a chance." Victoria laughed without humor. "You really don't know humans very well, do you? I know enough to recognize strength when I see it. You are a leader. You must think of your people." "I am thinking of my people. And I'm thinking that if your brother wants to start a war, having you alive is the only thing that might stop it." Victoria keyed her calm. "Garrett, I want a full defensive analysis. How long can we hold against a Kethran assault?" Against 3 warships? Maybe an hour if we're lucky. Then we'd better get unlucky. Start fortifying. Zira stepped forward, her movements still pained. This is madness. You cannot fight them. Watch me. Why? Why would you risk everything for someone you hate? Victoria met those golden eyes and found her answer in the desperation she saw there. The same desperation she'd felt 7 years ago when the world burned. Because if I let them take you without a fight, I'm no better than the people who stood by and watched my family die. And I'm done being that person. For the first time since falling through the gate, Zira smiled. It was a small thing, barely there, but genuine. Then we fight together, Victoria Kane. 2 queens against the storm. I'm not a queen. You built a kingdom from ashes and rule it with strength tempered by mercy. What else would you call yourself? Zira extended her hand, long fingers marked with the scars of her own battles. I know, Catherine Madison. I know their tactics. Let me help you protect your people. Victoria looked at that offered hand for a long moment. Every instinct, every memory screamed at her to refuse. But she thought of Sarah's face, of Marcus's last words, of all the times she'd wished someone, anyone, had chosen differently. She took Zira's hand. The alien's grip was strong despite her injuries, and warmer than Victoria expected. All right, Your Majesty, Victoria said with a grim smile. Let's show them what 2 queens can do. The storm raged harder, and somewhere above the clouds hunters waited. But in the shelter, 2 enemies began planning their survival, and neither noticed when hatred started shifting into something else entirely, something that might save them both, or doom them completely. The building shook again, and this time, the lights didn't come back on. The darkness swallowed them whole, punctuated only by emergency lights that cast long shadows across the infirmary. Victoria's hand went immediately to her flashlight, the beam cutting through the blackness. Beside her, Zira's eyes reflected the light, glowing like a cat's. Main power's down. Garrett's voice crackled through the comm. Switching to backup generators. We've got maybe 12 hours of reserve. Route everything to essential systems, Victoria ordered. Life support, medical, communications, kill everything else. Already on it, boss. Victoria turned to Zira. You said you know their tactics. Talk. Zira moved to the wall display, her fingers dancing across the interface with surprising familiarity despite the alien design. A holographic map of the surrounding area materialized, showing the shelter as a green dot surrounded by kilometers of wilderness. Above it, 3 red points marked the orbiting ships. My brother commands the lead vessel. Captain Theron of the 2nd ship is loyal to him absolutely. The 3rd is likely Enforcer Krath. All 3 are hunters trained from birth. Zira's voice took on a clinical tone, emotion locked away behind strategy. They will wait until the storm weakens to minimal interference levels. Then they will deploy assault teams in 3 waves. Why 3? Because they want me alive. The first wave tests your defenses and identifies weaknesses. The second exploits those weaknesses. The third captures the prize while you are broken and desperate. Zira's jaw tightened. It is how we conquered 47 worlds. Victoria studied the map, her mind racing through possibilities. The shelter had been designed to withstand environmental hazards, not military assault. Reinforced walls, yes, but against Kethran plasma weapons, she'd be lucky if they lasted 5 minutes. What about the storm itself? Can we use it? Zira tilted her head. A gesture Victoria was learning meant consideration. The ion discharge interferes with targeting systems and shields, but it also makes visibility near 0. They will come in fast and hard, relying on thermal scans to locate targets. Then we make them see what we want them to see. Victoria's mind clicked through old training, tactics she'd learned in the Colonial Defense Forces before the raids. Garrett, how many heat signature drones do we have left? Maybe 20. They're old, though. Pre-war surplus. Perfect. Get them ready. I want them scattered across the perimeter, mimicking human thermal signatures. She turned back to Zira. What do Kethran heat signatures look like compared to humans? We run hotter. 3 to 4 degrees above your baseline, and our hearts beat in our upper chest here. Zira touched a spot just below her collarbone. The thermal bloom is distinctive. Victoria smiled without warmth. So if they scan and see humans but no Kethrin signatures in the main building, they will assume I am hiding in the auxiliary structures or attempting to flee through the tunnels. Zira's eyes widened slightly. You want them to split their forces? I want them confused, scattered, and fighting an enemy that isn't where they think it is. Victoria keyed her calm. Garrett, I need a full inventory of everything we can weaponize. And get me Lieutenant Chen. I need someone who knows demolitions. Chen died in the outbreak last year. Victoria's chest tightened, another name on the list of people she'd failed to save. Then find me someone who can follow instructions and isn't afraid of explosives. That would be Danny. Kid's got a gift for making things go boom. Send him to the command center. We're about to get creative. Over the next 3 hours, the shelter transformed from a sanctuary into a trap. Danny. A lanky 19-year-old with nervous hands and brilliant eyes helped Victoria and Zira rig every auxiliary building with improvised explosives, old fuel cells, fertilizer from the hydroponics bay. Even medical oxygen tanks became weapons in waiting. Zira worked alongside them without complaint, her knowledge of Kethrin weak points proving invaluable. The armor is strongest at the shoulders and chest, she explained while wiring a detonator. But the joints, particularly at the knees and neck, are vulnerable. A shaped charge here would sever the power coupling. Victoria watched her work with grudging respect. Whatever else Zira was, she wasn't useless. Her hands moved with practiced precision, never hesitating, never questioning. Like she'd done this before. How does a queen know so much about combat? Victoria asked. All Kethrin royalty serve in the military before taking the throne. I commanded a border fleet for 8 years before my coronation.
Zira's voice was matter-of-fact. I was a good soldier, a better commander.
But not ruthless enough for my brother's taste. Ruthless how? Zira's hand stilled. He wanted me to execute prisoners, civilians who resisted occupation. I refused. He reported my weakness to the council. She resumed working, but Victoria saw the tension in her shoulders. That was the beginning of the end. So you're not like them. I am exactly like them. I just choose differently. Zira met Victoria's eyes. Do not mistake me for innocent, Victoria. I have killed. I have burned worlds in service to the throne. The difference is I learned to regret it. Before Victoria could respond, the building shook violently. Not from the storm this time. From something landing hard on the roof of the southern auxiliary building. Contact. Garrett's voice shouted through the comm. 3 bogies just dropped through the storm. They're testing the perimeter. Victoria grabbed her rifle and ran for the command center, Zira matching her pace despite the wound in her side. The monitors showed 3 armored figures moving through the storm with mechanical precision, their plasma rifles sweeping in coordinated patterns. They are scouts, Zira said, her voice tight. Mapping your defenses before the main assault? Then let's give them something to map. Victoria keyed the detonator for the southern building. The explosion lit up the storm like a miniature sun. The shockwave sent all 3 scouts sprawling, their armor cracked but not breached. They scrambled for cover as automatic turrets emerged from hidden positions, raking the area with gunfire. 1 scout went down, armor finally punctured. The other 2 retreated, moving with the fluid grace of predators who just learned their prey had teeth. First blood to us, Victoria said grimly. But they know we're ready now. They will adapt, Zira warned. Theron is not a fool, he will. She stopped, her eyes widening. No, he would not. What? The colonists. How many are in the shelter? 43, counting us. Why? Zira turned to the communications console, her fingers flying across controls. Because Theron knows I will not allow innocents to die for me. If he threatens your people, he believes I will surrender to save them. Victoria's blood ran cold. Can he get to them? Not directly, but he can make you choose, the shelter or the people. He will force your hand. As if summoned by her words, the communications array crackled to life. A voice spoke in Kethron, harsh and commanding. Zira translated, her face ashen. He says he knows I am here. He says if I do not surrender within 1 hour, he will level the entire shelter. Every building, every tunnel. He will turn this place into a crater and leave no survivors to tell the tale. Victoria's hands clenched into fists. He's bluffing. He is not. Theron does not bluff. Zira moved toward the door. I must go. I cannot let your people die for me. Victoria blocked her path. You take one step outside and this was all for nothing. Those ships won't leave. They'll kill you, then kill us anyway to eliminate witnesses. You do not know that. Yes, I do, because I know cruelty. I know people who enjoy breaking others. Victoria's voice was steel. Your brother isn't here for you. He's here to prove a point. That resistance is futile. That defiance means death. Zira's shoulders slumped. Then what do we do? Victoria turned back to the monitors, her mind racing. 43 lives depending on her decision. 43 people who trusted her to keep them safe. She thought of Sarah, of Marcus, of every face she'd failed to save. Not this time. We call his bluff, Victoria said. And we make him regret it. She keyed the general frequency, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her gut. This is Victoria Kane, leader of Refuge Station. I'm responding to your ultimatum. Here's my answer. She paused, looking at Zira, at the alien queen who'd stumbled into her shelter-seeking sanctuary, at the woman who could have been her enemy but chose to stand beside her instead. Go to hell. Victoria cut the transmission and turned to Garrett. Evacuate everyone to the lower tunnels. Now. Seal every hatch between them and the surface. Boss, those tunnels haven't been used in years. They might not even be stable. They're more stable than this building will be in 59 minutes. Move! Garrett ran, shouting orders. The shelter erupted into controlled chaos as colonists grabbed emergency supplies and headed for the depths. Zira watched them go, her expression unreadable. You doom them by protecting me. I am protecting them by not teaching them that surrender means safety, because it doesn't. Not with people like your brother. Victoria checked her rifle, loading fresh magazines. Now, you said you were a commander. Prove it. Help me turn this shelter into a killing ground they'll never forget. Zira straightened, and Victoria saw something shift in those golden eyes. The resignation faded, replaced by something harder, sharper, the look of a warrior who just decided to fight. Very well, Victoria Kane. Let us show them what two queens can do when backed into a corner. They had 57 minutes until the bombardment began. Victoria intended to make every second count. The tunnels beneath Refuge Station had been carved during the colony's first year, back when Victoria still believed they might find valuable minerals in the bedrock. Dead. They'd found nothing but stone and disappointment, but the network remained, a labyrinth of passages that now offered the only real protection against orbital bombardment. Victoria watched the last colonist disappear into the darkness, then sealed the hatch with her own hands. The locking mechanism groaned but held. 3 feet of reinforced steel between them and the surface. It would have to be enough. 42 minutes, Garrett said, his voice tight. Victoria turned to where Zira stood studying the shelter's schematics with fierce concentration. The alien queen had transformed over the past hour. Gone, was the wounded refugee. In her place stood something that reminded Victoria of herself in the early days after the raids. Dangerous, desperate, determined. The main building is the obvious target, Zira said, tracing pathways with one long finger. Theron will focus his bombardment here in the command center where he expects to find me. So we give him what he expects. Victoria pulled up the drone controls. We route power to make it look like someone's using the systems. Heat signatures from the drones will make it seem like we're still inside. And while he wastes his ammunition on an empty building, we hit his ships from the ground. You said their shields are weakened by the ion storm. How weakened? Zira's eyes gleamed. Enough that a concentrated barrage from surface-to-air weapons might penetrate. But you would need military-grade missiles, not civilian. Who said we're civilians? Victoria crossed to a storage locker hidden behind false paneling. Inside, wrapped in protective cloth, sat 4 Hammerhead-class anti-aircraft missiles, pre-war military hardware she'd liberated during the chaos after the raids. I kept these for emergencies. 4 missiles against 3 warships, Zira calculated quickly. We would need perfect targeting to make them count. Then we'd better not miss. Victoria began hauling the missiles out. Each one was 6 feet long, sleek and deadly. Can you operate the targeting computer? Catherine's systems are similar enough. Yes, I can manage. Danny appeared from the shadows, his face pale but determined. I rigged the charges in the auxiliary buildings like you asked. One touch and they all blow. Good work, kid. Victoria clapped his shoulder. Now get down to the tunnels. This is about to get loud. With respect, ma'am, I'd rather stay. You're gonna need help loading those missiles. Victoria looked at this 19-year-old boy who should have been worried about college and dating, not warfare and survival. But his hands were steady and his eyes were clear. He'd made his choice. All right, but you do exactly what I say when I say it. Understood? Yes, ma'am. They hauled the missiles to the roof access, using an old cargo lift that groaned under the weight. The storm battered them the moment they emerged into open air, rain like bullets and wind strong enough to knock a person down. Lightning forked across clouds that churned with unnatural colors, the ion discharge painting everything in shades of purple and green. Victoria and Danny wrestled the first missile into the portable launcher, while Zira worked the targeting computer, her fingers dancing across the interface with inhuman speed. The Kethran ships hung in orbit above them, waiting like vultures. 30 minutes! Garrett's voice crackled through the comm. They're charging weapons. I'm reading massive energy buildup. How massive? Enough to vaporize everything in a half-mile radius. Boss, you need to get underground now. Not yet. Victoria locked the first missile into place. Zira, do you have a target? The second ship, Theron's vessel, has too many redundant systems. But Captain Theron's second ship has a exposed reactor port near the stern. If we hit it precisely, we only get one shot. Make it count. Zira's hands stilled on the controls. For a moment she was silent, and when she spoke, her voice was barely audible over the storm. That ship carries 300 crew, good soldiers. Some of them were my friends before the coup. Victoria understood what she was asking, what she was sacrificing. Can we disable it without killing them? No, the reactor will overload. They will have perhaps 90 seconds to evacuate. Most will not make it. I'm sorry, as am I. Zira's finger moved to the firing control. But they chose their side and I chose mine. Targeting lock achieved. Ready to fire on your command. Victoria looked at Danny, at this kid who'd stayed when he could have run. At Zira, who was about to kill her own people to protect colonists she'd never met. At the shelter below, where 42 lives huddled in darkness, trusting her to save them. She thought of Sarah's face, of Marcus's last words, of every choice that had led to this moment. Fire! The missile screamed into the storm, a contrail of fire cutting through the chaos. Victoria watched it arc upward, watched it pierce through the ion clouds, watched it find its target with devastating precision. The explosion was silent at first, too far away for sound to reach. Then the shockwave hit, a wall of pressure that sent all three of them sprawling. The second ship listed, fire blooming from its stern, atmosphere venting into space in crystalline streams. Direct hit! Garrett shouted through the comm. The ship's breaking apart. They're falling. Victoria scrambled to her feet in time to see burning debris begin to rain from the sky. Not the whole ship, but pieces, chunks of hull plating, escape pods spinning out of control, bodies. Brace! She screamed. A section of hull the size of a truck slammed into the Western Auxiliary building, obliterating it in a cascade of fire and metal. Another piece hit the ground 200 yards from the shelter, the impact crater instantly filling with rainwater. The storm seemed to rage harder, as if fed by the destruction. The other ships are returning fire! Zira shouted over the chaos. We have seconds before light filled the world. Pure, searing white light that turned night into day. Victoria's eyes burned even through closed lids. The main building disintegrated, vaporized by concentrated plasma fire from orbit. The blast wave picked her up like a leaf in a hurricane and hurled her across the roof. She hit the ground hard, her head cracking against concrete. Stars exploded across her vision. Distantly she heard Danny screaming, heard Zira shouting her name, heard the world ending in fire and thunder. Get up! A voice whispered in her mind. Sarah's voice. Get up, Mama. Please, get up. Victoria forced her eyes open. The shelter was gone. just gone. Where the command center had stood, there was now a smoking crater still glowing with residual heat. The auxiliary buildings were rubble. The outer wall was breached in 3 places, and through those breaches, armored figures were advancing. "Victoria!" Zira's hands pulled at her, trying to lift her. The alien queen was bleeding from a dozen cuts, green blood mixing with rain. "We must move. The hunters are coming." "How many?" "Too many." Victoria let Zira pull her to her feet, her body screaming in protest. Danny lay nearby, unconscious but breathing. She grabbed him under the arms and started dragging him toward the tunnel hatch. "Leave him," Zira said urgently. "We cannot carry him and fight. Then we carry him and don't fight. I'm not leaving anyone else behind." They hauled Danny between them, moving as fast as Victoria's battered body would allow. Plasma fire scorched the ground around them, the hunters closing in with mechanical precision. Victoria could see them clearly now. 8 figures in full combat armor, weapons raised, moving like they'd done this 1,000 times before. Because they had. They reached the hatch just as the first hunter opened fire. Zira spun, her hand snapping out in a gesture Victoria didn't recognize. A shimmering field of energy erupted from her palm, catching the plasma bolt and dissipating it harmlessly. "You didn't mention you could do that?" Victoria shouted. "You did not ask!" Zira's voice was strained. "I cannot hold this for long." "Get him inside!" Victoria wrenched the hatch open and shoved Danny through, his body tumbling down the ladder. She turned to follow, but Zira wasn't moving. The alien queen stood between Victoria and the advancing hunters, her shield flickering, her body shaking with effort. "Zira, come on. They want me alive." "They will take me and leave you be." Zira's voice was calm, accepting. "Save your people, Victoria Kane. Let me save mine." Saw what Zira intended? The alien queen was going to surrender, to sacrifice herself to buy Victoria time to seal the tunnels and protect the colonists. Like hell. Victoria raised her rifle and fired, not at the hunters but at the ground between them. The concrete exploded, sending fragments flying. The hunters fell back, their formation breaking for just a moment. In that moment, Victoria grabbed Zira and hauled her toward the hatch with strength she didn't know she possessed. "I told you before," Victoria snarled. 2 queens, together, or not at all. She shoved Zira through the hatch and followed, her hands finding the manual seal just as plasma fire turned the roof above them into molten slag. The hatch slammed shut, the locks engaged with a sound like breaking bones, and then they were falling, tumbling down the ladder into darkness, the sounds of destruction fading to a distant thunder above. They hit the bottom hard, a tangle of limbs and pain. Victoria's ribs screamed, her head spun, but she was alive. They were alive. "That was foolish," Zira gasped beside her. "You should have left me." "Probably. But I'm done watching people die when I could have saved them. We are trapped now. They will cut through the hatch within minutes." Victoria smiled through the pain. "Let them try. These tunnels go on for miles, and I know every inch of them. Your hunters don't." She keyed her comm. "Garrett, what's our status?" "All colonists are secure in the deep shelter. We're reading multiple hostiles on the surface, but none have breached the tunnel network yet. Keep it that way." "And, Garrett, get ready with those charges we planted. We're about to collapse half these tunnels. Boss, that'll cut off our escape routes. It'll cut off theirs, too. Do it." Victoria pulled herself to her feet, helped Zira up, and checked on Danny. The kid was breathing, a nasty bump on his head but otherwise intact. "Can you walk?" she asked Zira. "I can run if needed." "Good, because we're not done yet." Victoria started down the tunnel, her flashlight beam cutting through absolute darkness. "You said there were 3 ships. We took out 1. That leaves 2. We have no weapons capable of... We have the storm. We have these tunnels. And we have the one thing they don't expect." Victoria looked back at Zira. "We have each other." Above them, the sounds of cutting equipment started up. "The hunters were coming." Victoria smiled. "Let 'em come." The tunnel network became their fortress, every junction a potential ambush, every collapse a calculated trap. Victoria led them deeper, past the colonist shelter to passages she'd explored in the early days, when she'd still believed there might be something worth finding in the rock. What she'd found instead was a warren of natural caves connecting to the man-made tunnels, a maze that even she didn't fully understand. Perfect. "They are following," Zira said, her enhanced hearing picking up sounds Victoria couldn't. 6 of them. They move cautiously, but with purpose. How long until they reach the first junction? 3 minutes. Victoria keyed her comm. "Garrett, charges ready, standing by. Wait for my signal. And Garrett, when this is over, I'm giving you a raise. I'll hold you to that, boss." They reached the junction, and Victoria positioned herself behind a support pillar, rifle ready. Zira crouched across from her, and for a moment their eyes met in the dim glow of the emergency lights. "I have fought many battles," Zira said quietly. "Commanded fleets, conquered worlds. But I've never fought.